Good morning, Little Masters, and welcome back to today's Tolkien Times, a Prancing Pony podcast production. I'm the Man of the West, and it is time to wrap up my 100th week of the TTT with Silmarillion Saturday. It's hard to believe, but this is my 600th episode of today's Tolkien Times, though if you count the bonus episodes I've been doing for those of you who support the show on Patreon, I'm a lot closer to 700. Still, what a ride. Thank you all for watching and listening. Last series, we laid a foundation for Two Order's arrival in Gondolin by reading of Miglin and then beginning of the ruin of Beleriand and the fall of Fingolfin. And then we finally arrived in Gondolin yesterday, wrapping up that part of the story. There's a lot more material in the Silmarillion that's connected. So we're going to finish up of the ruin of Beleriand and the fall of Fingolfin over the next 3 weeks, leading us to the Nirnaeth Arnoediad next series. Now, last time, we read about Sauron's capture of Tol Sirion. Today, we meet the Easterlings and bring Húrin and Huor to the Hidden City. Why is it no surprise to me that Húrin features in my 100th week? It is told that at this time the swarthy men came first into Beleriand. Some were already secretly under the dominion of Morgoth and came at his call, but not all, for the rumor of Beleriand, of its lands and waters, of its wars and riches, went now far and wide, and the wandering feet of men were ever set westward in those days. These men were short and broad, long and strong in the arm. Their skins were swart or sallow, and their hair was dark, as were their eyes. Their houses were many, and some had greater liking for the dwarves of the mountains than for the elves. But Maedhros, knowing the weakness of the Noldor and the Edain, whereas the pits of Angband seemed to hold store inexhaustible and ever renewed, made alliance with these new-come men, and gave his friendship to the greatest of their chieftains, Bor and Ulfang. And Morgoth was well content, for this was as he had designed. The sons of Bor were Borlad, Borlach, and Borthand, and they followed Maedhros and Maglor, and cheated the hope of Morgoth, and were faithful. The sons of Ulfang the Black were Ulfast and Ulworth, and Uldor the Accursed, and they followed Caranthir, and swore allegiance to him, and proved faithless. There was small love between the Edain and the Easterlings, and they met seldom, for the newcomers abode long in East Beleriand, but Hador's folk were shut in Hithlum, and Beor's house was well nigh destroyed. The people of Haleth were at first untouched by the northern war, for they dwelt to the southward in the forest of Brethil. But now there was battle between them and the invading orcs, for they were stout-hearted men, and would not lightly forsake the woods that they loved. And amid the tale of defeats of that time, the deeds of the Haladin are remembered with honor. For after the taking of Minas Tirith, the orcs came through the western pass, and maybe would have ravaged even to the mouths of Sirion. But Halmir, lord of the Haladin, sent swift word to Thingol, for he had friendship with the elves that guarded the borders of Doriath. Then Beleg Strongbow, chief of the march wardens of Thingol, brought great strength of the Sindar armed with axes into Brethil, and issuing from the deeps of the forest, Halmir and Beleg took an orc legion at unawares and destroyed it. Thereafter, the black tide out of the north was stemmed in that region, and the orcs dared not cross the Teglin for many years after. The people of Haleth dwelt yet in watchful peace in the forest of Brethil, and behind their guard the kingdom of Nargothrond had respite and mustered its strength. At this time, Húrin and Huor, the sons of Galdor of Dorloman, were dwelling with the Haladin, for they were akin. In the days before the Dagor Bragalach, those two houses of the Edain were joined at a great feast, when Galdor and Glorithel, the children of Hador Goldenhead, were wedded to Hareth and Haldir, the children of Halmir, lord of the Haladin. Thus it was that the sons of Galdor were fostered in Brethil by Haldir their uncle, according to the custom of men in that time. And they went both to that battle with the orcs, even Huor, for he would not be restrained, though he was but 13 years old. But being with a company that was cut off from the rest, they were pursued to the ford of Brithiach, and there they would have been taken or slain, but for the power of Ulmo that was still strong in Sirion. A mist arose from the river and hid them from their enemies, and they escaped over the Brithiach into Dimbar and wandered among the hills beneath the sheer walls of the Chrysaegrim until they were bewildered in the deceits of that land and knew not the way to go on or to return. There Thorondor espied them, and he sent 2 of his eagles to their aid, and the eagles bore them up and brought them beyond the encircling mountains to the secret vale of Tumladen and the hidden city of Gondolin, which no man yet had seen. And finally, we tie our First Age Friday and Silmarillion Saturday stories together. Yesterday, we finally saw Tuor, son of Huor, arrive in Gondolin after his long journey. But what's the background to that story? This arrival of his father Huor and his uncle Húrin in Gondolin. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's go back to the beginning of the reading where we meet the Swarthy men. These are the ancestors of the Easterlings, the same group of people who will overrun Dor-lómin after the Nirnaeth, and who, in the Second Age, turn to evil and worship Sauron. The only name Nazgul, Khamûl the Easterling, is, as it says right on the tin, an Easterling. They are largely responsible for the end of the line of the kings of Gondor, and continue fighting the men of the West, who are themselves, of course, the descendants of the Edain, long into the Third Age. They are different in appearance, shorter, wider, with swart or sallow skin color. Swart is dark or black, sallow is yellow or pale brown. Dark hair, dark eyes. And they have longer arms, which is an interesting trait, though I wonder if their arms just seemed long proportionally because their torsos are shorter. I don't know. I'm not really sure what Tolkien is trying to say here, what the point is about them having longer arms with the shorter bodies. Whatever the case, though, their short and wide stature reminds one of dwarves a little bit, which might explain why some of their tribes are friendlier with the dwarves than they are with the elves. They certainly don't seem to like the company of the men in this area. The Edain and the Easterlings don't get along very well. And we get a clue of what's going to come in the Nirnaeth as Tolkien spoils his own story. Some Easterlings do the right thing, others don't. But what's critical in this story is the connection with the House of Hador and the House of Haleth. We read about the joining of these houses when Hador's children, his daughter Glorithel and his son Galdor, marry the children of the Lord of the Haladin. That leads to the sons of Galdor being raised by their uncle Haldir of the Haladin. Now, we read of their fighting as young boys. Huor is said to be only 13. That would make Húrin 16. They get cut off. They're going to be captured or slain. And Ulmo, already at work, already planning the arrival of Tuor in Gondolin that we've been building up to, and all the things that follow from that, hides these young men from their enemies until Thorondor spots them and brings them to Turgon in Gondolin. And we'll see what their arrival is like next week. For now, though, folks, that does it for this week's Silmarillion Saturday. Thank you for joining me, and please come back next week as Húrin and Huor return home under a very strict NDA. And thanks again for watching 100 weeks of today's Tolkien Times. Please visit patreon.com/Tolkien Times to learn how you can get an ad-free feed, bonus episodes, and become a part of my content council to help me decide what I'll talk about each series. Subscribe to the show in your podcast apps or to the channel here on YouTube, and be sure you're following @PrancingPonyPod on social media. Finally, as Faramir says, go with the goodwill of all good men.